Good morning and welcome. My name is Hamish Renton. I'm Chief Executive of HRA Global, and I'll introduce briefly Jeffrey Verpaalen, who's our Director of Agrifood, who will introduce our full panel.
Thank you, Hamish. My name is Jeffrey Verpaalen. I am based in Spain. Have about 13 years of experience in the agri-food industry in different roles, specifically vegetable seed market expertise. And this is also the topic of today's discussion with two of our expert team members who I will introduce in a moment. We see an uptick in interest from vegetable seed market players in helping them with market data, insights, and developing strategies. So we thought today would be interesting to chat about a few topics, such as the trends that we are seeing in vegetable seeds, the challenges and the opportunity that the different players are facing, innovations in sustainability and agri-food in general also, and some predictions perhaps for 2025 as we just kicked off this year. So I'll start by introducing our expert team members. So Franck Berger is an internationally recognized expert in the seed and agri-food sector with over 30 years of experience in corporate strategy, business development, and operational management. As the former deputy CEO of Limagrain, the world's largest vegetable seed company, I'm really happy to have Franck on the call today.
Thank you, Jeffrey, for the nice introduction. After my career at Limagrain, I've actually now taken a career of independent board member and senior advisor and consultant and also recruiter for the industry. So very happy to be here today with the HRA Global team.
Our second expert today is Fulvio Berton, agri-industry advisor and managing director of Innovate to Grow.
Hello to all of you. I'm Fulvio Berton, 35 years in the agri-industry sector, where 20 years across a number of different multinational companies, covering different type of roles and responsibilities, from product development, corporate strategy, and also a number of operational roles. And during the last 10 years, active as advisor and consultant across a number of different companies operating in the breeding sector, but as well in some other sectors like biological solutions and technology applied to seeds and cultivation.
So that's us as a team. We thought we touch on a few topics, one of them being the complexity of the vegetable seed market. This is a very dynamic market, and we see the different challenges that companies are facing. Almost all of them are looking for accurate and granular market data in combination with expert insights to develop strategies for their companies. So I thought it'd be great if we could start with Franck and having him share a bit his view of how vegetable seed companies can successfully manage strategies in this complex and dynamic market. Franck, perhaps you can share a bit about with your experience.
Yes, thank you, Jeffrey. Well, one of the things about the vegetable seed market, basically the vegetable production, but is that it is highly fragmented. It's fragmented between multiple crops. It's fragmented between multiple countries or regions, which all have their own dynamics. And unlike in the field seed or the field crop seed, the business, there is very little accurate public data available. So basically, whenever you want to really look into a market, you have to, ramp up your sleeves and really do the groundwork to really understand what is going on in the market, get the accuracy in the acreages, get the accuracy in the seed consumption per unit surface, and also the output in terms of the production which is gone. So this actually is something that takes a lot of work. Some companies do it by themselves. Some recourse to the services of people like Fulvio, who are highly expert in this data and dynamics, and are able to deep dive into some specific markets. So it's usually a complex task, and it is a critical task because that's the basis for you to actually be able to formulate and elaborate a given strategy in any given sector. So not something very easy, but absolutely critical to be able to gain enough market insights to drive what it is you want to actually execute in the market. And there's a lot of effort put in a lot of companies by this.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And that brings me to you, Fulvio. We've worked on several projects on this topic, and really see the need for granular data, right? Not only on a crop level, but on a typology level. If you talk about a crop like tomatoes, if you have a very high level market sizing number, this really doesn't tell you the story. And with your data model and the complementary insights from folks like Franck and others, this is a very helpful tool, right, Fulvio, for companies to help develop their strategies.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you need to understand, the context where you operate, and you need to understand what is happening today. But even more important, you need to understand what is going to happen in the future, because breeding, especially in vegetable, is a long journey. It can take up to 5, 7, 8 years before you can introduce a new variety in the market. So to understand those dynamics is a very crucial and critical, success factor for any seed breeding company. And just to add a couple of additional comments to what Franck already said, it's a difficult exercise. And is an exercise that is becoming even more difficult because the number of crops, or even better to say, the number of typologies cultivated by crops have been increasing during the past years. I mean, just an example, if you take a tomato, 20 years ago, there were 4, 5, 6 typologies. Today, you count probably 20 or even more different typologies. And the next level of complication is the type of different environment cultivation where those typologies are cultivated. So open field, passive greenhouse, active greenhouse, all that. So again, it's complex, it's fragmented, but it's not an impossible exercise. I mean, it will require time and and dedication, but it will be possible to collect reasonable, reliable data.
That's interesting, Fulvio. I mean, a question maybe for both of you, because you seem to be describing what I recognise a very complicated, fragmented, kind of data dark kind of landscape here, particularly in vegetable seeds. How do companies navigate the changes in supply chain? We've seen pricing move around. I mean, in a number of markets we operate, I mean, they're not all moving 4 times higher like in cocoa, but prices move around. You have regulations, you've got climate impacts, you've got kind of illegal seed practices, and of course customer changes of taste. People want changes in organoleptics, slicing, flavor, presentation, color, keeping quality. How do companies navigate that at the moment as you see it?
Maybe I can go first, Franck. As we said, those dynamics are facing a level of acceleration in terms of the speed of those changes, because there are a number of influencing situations. You mentioned some of those, Hamish, climate change, water availability, labor shortage, what we experienced during the last years, rising of the input cost, energy, fertilizer, increasing regulation at the local level, to protect the environment. You cannot access water as it was in the past. Everything is becoming really more complicated in one side, but also those dynamics are really, happening and changing in a much faster way compared to the past. So, you need really, to be able to cope with those changes. This implies that from a company standpoint, you need also to exercise a certain level of agility and flexibility in reviewing and adjusting and adopting your processes, organizations, and structure.
Hamish, is that this is actually, there's a degree of complexity, and companies need to be ready to actually face this degree of complexity. First of all, you need feet on the ground. You need to have people who are close to the market, who are able to talk to the growers, who are able to talk to the people who are marketing actually the produce. There is one very important element, particularly in Western Europe, is that you have to absolutely need to be close to the chain, in the category managers in the supermarkets. Talking to these people is extremely important to capture trends in the consumptions on one side, and B, with your feet on the ground, you're able to capture the technological trends that are also affecting the production. All of this work together as an integrated team. So crop teams, for instance, something that you find very often in the companies, because these crop teams need to be able to, I would say, link the different pieces between the R&D to the consumer, and make sure that all of this works in sync, to make sure that you're not having a weak link somewhere that will actually derail your breeding effort and your marketing effort. And the last point is that there is an ever-changing regulatory environment. It's also very important that you have people in your teams who are able to tell you where regulation is going, in which direction. Let's take one example, for instance, is what is happening in the renewal of molecules for phytoprotection at the EU level, because this can have sectorial, very large impacts on a given sector of the production. So all of this makes the complexity and the fact that you really need to have strong organizations to be able to tackle all of this at once.
Just a curiosity to build on that, I read a couple of days ago an article related to lettuce production in California, where the production costs have been increasing by 150% for the grower there, and a big portion of that cost increase just to cope with the more stringent regulation that the local state put in place, especially related to the use and consumption of water.
Every market is unique and needs varieties that are suited to its climates, to the growing conditions, to cultural preferences. So when looking at market and consumer trends, we are looking at these factors, and at a consumer level, we see certain changes, right? The shift to more easier to eat vegetables, snack-sized vegetables, etc. What do you see in terms of driving changes in vegetable demand at the moment?
Trends is actually the enlargement of the offer. Fulvio mentioned that in the tomatoes in particular, where you had the 4 or 5 categories 10 years ago, now you have 20 or 25, and managing that is really complex. Maybe one of the other trends is the trend to snacking, and particularly if we talk about tomatoes. That's something that is getting a lot of traction. People now go for the healthy snacking, and you see a lot of initiatives to bring like mini vegetables that can be on a bite size kind of thing. And there's globally maybe a trend for people to look for produce which has been actually with sustainable practices in terms of production. There is a high consciousness about that. Now, the question is that sometimes the market is slightly oscillating between the higher level, high sustainability, more local production, and the more, I would say, basic primary offer, which tends to be still very much driven by price, and that kind of creates a divider here between some sort of two categories and anything in between. But these are some of the trends I can think of, but I think Fulvio can complement that.
Yeah, I will add a couple of comments here, Frank. First of all, we need to understand that the consumer are changing from a generation standpoint. So the new generations, the consumers that were born in the 80s and 90s and later, today represent more or less 50% of the total consumers. And those, younger consumers, they are looking to food in general, not only to vegetable, to food in general, in a very different way that, our generation, my generation, Frank's generation, we were, looking in the past. So they are really much more attentive to all the aspects related to sustainability, not only how the food was produced, but also how it's packed, how it's conserved, and so on and so forth. They are much more attentive to all health benefits components related to the different type of foods. And Frank already mentioned snacking on the way is something very, very common for them. And this is also what we saw in the marketplace. Again, the example of tomatoes, where today more or less 55% here in Europe, not only of tomato consume is on the small size category for snacking. And also to underline that they are looking also for affordable price. So again, coming back to where to produce, how to produce in terms of production cost versus what will be the price for the end consumer. This is also something that we need really to better consider compared to what happened in the past.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I would agree with all of those trends, and I guess the two other ones I would see is there's a move away in a concern about ultra processed food, and that's kind of helping produce and vegetable seeds specifically. And then secondly, as you say, there's very much an emphasis on the go consumption, which is that snacking moment, sort of out of home, and you don't have access to a knife to slice a tomato. You need a smaller portion. So then again, that's dragging that smaller demand for smaller fruits and smaller vegetables through the chain as well. I mean, if we turn to kind of the market trends and the consumer trends that are shaping the future, what we're going to look into our crystal balls really, what scenarios do you think will influence seed breeding strategies and product development? Is it coming from, if you like, the technology end of what can be achieved, or is it being pulled through from the shopper's end, or the retailers shaping it, or are the seed breeders and the growers having an influence on that as well? Who's really shaping the future of industry and what we're going to be eating in, say, 10, 20 years' time?
Usually when you're looking at the markets and you're looking at the features that you need to put into the new varieties that you will be bringing to the market, you usually look at three things. What's the interest of the producer? So from a technical standpoint, what does the marketer want, right? For instance, for many, many years, marketers were driven by the question of shelf life because the supermarkets didn't want to have any waste in their shelf life, and then what the consumer wants. And I think the proportion of these elements have been evolving over time. A consumer demand or preferences are getting more and more scrutinized by the seed companies and are getting more and more important in the way the food chain actually chooses the varieties, and the influence of the retailer trial chain over the choice of the varieties that that will then be used by the growers is getting more and more traction. So I would say if you had a certain proportion 20 years ago, that proportion is now shifting slightly towards more the consumer characteristics and demand. Now that's from the demand standpoint. Now from the I would say supply standpoint, which is how do seed companies actually cater to these needs that have been expressed by the global chain and the consumers, then there's a series of technical elements which are coming to play. But one of those which is extremely important is speed and efficiency. And maybe we can come to that later in another part of the discussion about technologies in particular. But speed and efficiencies are absolutely critical for seed companies to actually get to market fast and to get to market in an efficient way, because R&D is extremely expensive and you absolutely need to have efficiency in this. Fulvio, to you.
No, I mean, nothing to add to that. I think you said very, very clearly. So just to summarize that, at the end, I think there are two key elements of this equation. As we said from the beginning of our conversation, the ability to be on the very front of what are the different trends and dynamics and changing. I mean, you need to understand as soon as possible those developments, because from there, and this is the second part of the equation, you need to develop new varieties that are answering to those new demands, and there everything that is going to make your process of breeding and developing, bringing new varieties to the marketplace, everything that is making those processes more efficient and faster, I mean, is absolutely a must to have.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Thanks for those insights, guys. And I think that HRA Global has the capability to really look at both sides of the spectrum, right? From the ag input sides of seeds to the retail and consumer end. Hamish, you've spent many years leading the fresh produce section for Tesco. And we have here with Fulvio and Franck, we have two leaders in vegetable seeds. So both sides of the spectrum are there, and I think it's critical to understand both sides, right? It's not good if seed companies are only talking to farmers. You also need to understand what's happening on a consumer level and those changing preferences. And I think HRA Global is very capable in doing that. One of the other things I wanted to pick your brain on, Franck and Fulvio, and also Hamish, is on benchmarking and understanding your company's position in the market, how to assess your own position, and hopefully many will choose to have an external objective view on that as well, which I think is important. But also benchmarking yourself shows where you stand, but also what's possible and how to get there. So it'd be good to understand from Franck, for example, how leading companies benchmark themselves and assess their position, and how to maintain your position if you are in a leadership position, such as the company that you've led for many, many years. Franck, what is usually, how do companies deal with benchmarking?
Well, I think it depends a little bit on your size. I mean, there's a clear question here. I mean, if you are a larger organization, then you have a lot of feet on the ground. If you take the Limagrain vegetable seed organization, we're talking 4,000 people scattered all over the planet. So that means that in certain regions with a high density, you have a lot of people who are actually scanning the market constantly, benchmarking what are the purchasing trends, either from the growers or the co-ops or the big retailers, and able to understand more or less precisely actually who's gaining traction in the market or not. I think if you're a small organization, it's much more complicated because you have less touch points, of course, and this is when usually you have to resort to maybe some external advice to be able to help you really understand what is what is going on. And I'm sure that's exactly where HRA, with the support of people like Fulvio, can come to play.
And Fulvio, for benchmarking, of course, also the market data cannot be ignored, right? You need to have the right market sizing for the different crops and typologies in the different markets to fully understand your position and have an accurate current state of the market and viewpoint, right?
Absolutely, absolutely correct. And Franck already said your ability and capability, on reaching out the market and the number of people that you have in the ground definitely make a substantial difference between what you can do by yourself and what you cannot do. But even a larger organization, they have time to time situations where they need to go outside for support and help, especially when you come to market expansions, new geography or new crops or new typology. There is not one solution fitting all the cases. You need to look case by case situation.
No, it's interesting, and I resonate with both your answers actually. And I think my build would be, it's not just enough to get a picture, however fuzzy or however HD your picture of how you're doing versus your competitors, but the point is what you do with it. So we're ahead on volume and behind on value. We're ahead on NPD but behind on commercialization, say. That's the picture that a firm might have, but the point is to change things, and in order that you can leapfrog, which is certainly, I've seen that before, certainly in this vertical, particularly where a company that might be number 3, number 4 in R&D suddenly leaps to the front with a big new innovation. So you know, even when you're at the front, you've got a pack of people behind you, because as we've all said, this is a dispersed, fragmented industry with no one sort of dominant player in all of the country crop combinations. So I think the exam question remains, the two big ones is, once you've got your benchmark, it's very much, where should I play? In terms of which country, which crops, even did what sort of sub-sector, and then how do I win? They're the two exam questions for me, really. So what are the bundle of tactics and actions that you're going to take to win in your chosen area once you've decided where to focus? And of course, that could be a roadmap, a long-term one, and a short-term action plan. And that's a lot of what we do for clients, really. So a quick question for you both, really, and perhaps, Franck, I'll invite you to chip in first. In terms of your career, you're steeped in this industry. What's your best practice for sort of staying competitive and building for the future through that innovation in product and seed breeding, etc.? What's your top practices?
Yeah, maybe just one thing to come back slightly on what was the question. The question before is that you made a question about how do you benchmark yourselves, and Fulvio made a very good point, which is, when you're not there, you cannot benchmark yourself. So that means that you actually also need some external support to be able to make some inroads in places where you are not. And then the question, where to play, how to win, is actually a question that should be a constant question for anyone working in that particular market. So concerning your second question, I think the one of the important points is that A, you cannot rest on your laurels, and B, you should be mindful of to be over certain of what you are doing in the market. Always the right thing. Because I think it's like in any industry. I mean, what got you there would not what got you here will not necessarily take you there. So I think being humble and really very periodically putting your strategies on the table and reassessing all of the elements of a strategy for a certain crop or segment or place is extremely important. I think this is a good practice that absolutely needs to be done, and absolutely needs to be 360. In other words, You look at the market. Is the market still dynamic, interesting, competitive? You look at your ability to compete in the market. Do you have the resources, the genetic resources, the people resources, the ability to be competitive on the prices? Is your supply chain okay? Is your marketing team up to speed with that particular concern? Do you have the genetic resources? So for me, if you are asking me about my practice in the past, I think these elements are very important ones. Don't rest on your laurels, be humble, and reassess your strategy on a very on a fairly high frequency, which I think will help you really understand if you're heading to the right direction. And why is this? And Fulvio say that also is because what you decide today, you will see the consequences of it only 3, 4, 5, 6 years down the road. So today's mistake is tomorrow's failure. So it's important to make as sure as you can that you are heading in the right direction.
Sure.
What you said, Franck, bring me back to some common memories 10 years ago when we did some interesting exercise together with you on strategic planning, and there to build on best practices. One element that I wanted to underline is the ability to assess yourself in terms of what is your true ability to compete in a given marketplace, crop, typology, country, and so on and so forth. And this is something that usually don't come on top of the agenda, because usually companies look to what is the market attractiveness, volumes, prices, margins, and those kind of things. But not all are putting the required time really to do an assessment. Do we have the ability to compete over there? Do we have the resources to start this breeding program? Do we have a sales force able to do the development of those varieties? For me, this is something that needed to come more bold across the different companies as far as the best practices.
Yeah, those are great insights, guys, and thank you very much for your reflections. Yeah, I think this was a great conversation, Hamish. I think you will agree. We are fortunate to have Franck and Fulvio as part of our team. Next week we will be at Food Logistica, engaging with many stakeholders in the food and veg industry. We will be at ISF and Euroseeds later on this year. So looking forward to continue these types of conversations, right, Hamish?
Yeah, no, exactly. And if I could call out a couple of things that's been said that really stuck with me and really resonated. I think, Fulvio, you brought a lens of looking at this as a system, as an ecosystem with the, effectively, yes, at one end it starts with the genetics, but at the other end it actually starts with the demand. It starts with people who are hungry and need to eat. And that understanding of the chain from, if you like, shopper preferences refracted through retailers, pushed to growers, supplied to retailers, and ultimately engineered by seed breeders, it is really important. And the chain, I took from you, Fulvio, the chain can't work if all those parts aren't integrated into a crop or a country. So I thought that was a really nice insight, really bang on the money there. And I think, Franck, if I could paraphrase some of your business advice, it would be, you've got to have very firm convictions about your strategy, but you've got to hold them extremely lightly and be prepared to change them in as the market changes, the shopper changes, the cost structure, your organization changes as well. So that agility of mind to have a tactic and a strategy, but be prepared to trade it in and upgrade it and morph it as things develop, really stuck with me as well. So I thought that was really interesting. So no, thank you for that.
Yeah, for me, it's the caliber of expertise that we have that we can bring on projects, right? So it's really privileged to Franck and Fulvio to have you in today's conversation. Thank you very much for your contributions, and perhaps some final reflections or predictions for 2025 as a wrap up for today's conversation would be great. Franck, you want to go first?
Predictions for 2025. Well, I think well, if I look at the projections that have been made for Europe by Freshfell, they seem to be saying that the market will be growing more or less at a 5% pace. So I hope it's a good prediction, because market has been shaky to say the least over maybe not last year, but the years before, right outside of COVID. So let's take this as a good omen. I think seed companies and breeders will continue demonstrating that they can innovate a lot to satisfy retailers and consumers' needs, and also make sure that they integrate well all the elements of sustainability, which is nowadays becoming a real major question. I don't know of any company that don't put sustainability as a very high on their agenda. And I think technology is evolving also at a very fast pace. We're seeing AI coming in. We're seeing a lot of new things. So I think there are exciting times ahead, and I'm happy to still be a little bit in the mood to make sure that I will see these changes come to fruition.
Thank you, Franck. Fulvio, some final words from your end?
But as we said, there are a number of increasing challenges, geopolitical, climate, increasing prices, and so on and so forth. But as we experienced in the past, there are also opportunities there. And of course, the opportunities are there for who, would be able to be on the front, on the front of those development and able to bring, innovative and sustainable solution, not only as far regard the new products and new varieties, but also, new processes and new approaches, relationship, networking, working together, all that, I mean, definitely could provide opportunities.
Sure. No, thank you very much. And look, I've really enjoyed this chat. I think it's really well timed because we're now starting the season of conferences that the industry has. And I like both those predictions and reflections. So just on behalf of the whole team here, thank you very much for coming on, guys.
You're most welcome.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Franck. Thank you, Fulvio. See you soon.
See you.
Bye. Thank you.